On this edition of In the Life, a sense of urgency.
It was democracy in action.
And I'm going to tell you it's your duty to speak up.
Creating a character.
It's my constant effort to make them bigger, to be more flamboyant, to queer them up a little bit.
A leap of faith.
I sort of figured, well, you know, if somebody comes right out and says, "Are you a lesbian?" I'm going to say yes.
All this and more on America's Gay and Lesbian News Magazine.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation and by the Arcus Foundation and by the Gill Foundation and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.
The world of comic books is filled with gay metaphors. Flamboyantly dressed superheroes with secret identities and mutant X-Men rejected by society. Perhaps that's why so many gay artists are drawn to the medium. You're about to meet Phil Jimenez, a successful and openly gay comic book creator who invited us behind the scenes to catch a glimpse of his imagination at work.
Some people think of comics as the trashiest of art forms or not even an art form. To me, they're modern myths, and I think they have all the same power as ancient myths to inspire hope and heroism. And it's incredible to be a part of that. Over the years, I've drawn just about every major character in comics: Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the X-Men. But my favorite will always be Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is Princess of the Amazons, raised on this island of women called Paradise Island. A lesbian haven, many would think. And she left her island home to come teach man a better way to live, peace, harmony, hope, love, equality between the sexes. What I love about Wonder Woman is that she's given me a set of rules to live by, a set of rules I've tried to live by my entire life. I love her, and I wouldn't have the life I do today without her.
Do you remember, do you remember, do you remember, do you remember,
Oh my gosh, is this actually where I used to live? Wow, they're pink. I was raised in small and pink apartments. No wonder I'm gay. I used to live right down there. I was a latchkey kid. My father left us when I was 6 months old, and my mother, God bless her, had to work. So I was alone a lot. What that meant was I drew all the time, created my own little worlds, played with my toy dinosaurs, and I watched a lot of TV. And it was on TV that I discovered Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman. All the world is waiting.
You wanted to reach out and touch her. She was amazing. I mean, she was like 6 foot in her stocking heels. She walked around in that costume like she owned it. And she was just stunning. Around the same time, I think this was actually 1976, my mother bought me my first comic. It was a Wonder Woman comic. And from then on, I was hooked. Wonder Woman was a sexual figure with extreme power. Here was a woman who was incredibly beautiful and incredibly desirable as a sex object. She ran around fighting crime in a bathing suit, for God's sakes. But she could throw a car over her head. She could kill a Medusa with her bare hands. And then she would go home to her CIA secret agent boyfriend, Steve Trevor. It was something that I think I could relate to, even though I'm not sure at 6 I could ever tell you why.
This was his first drawing, or his first comic book, so to speak, on the back of printout paper that I brought home from work. And he was 5 years old at the time. She's telling Steve she's going to get dressed, D-R-E-S-T. And this is where she's twirling to become Wonder Woman. He used to do this by the hour. He would lay on the floor and do nothing but draw.
I was by myself a lot. And I think one of the reasons I drew so much was to entertain myself. I do remember that I was not allowed to watch TV after a certain time, but I also knew that my mother wouldn't come home till a certain time. So very wisely, I would watch the TV and then turn the TV off half an hour before to let the machine cool down, because when she would come home, she would put her hand on the TV to see if it was still warm.
I felt very guilty, as I say, the guilt to have it, to leaving him by himself. But, you know, it was necessary at that time. That's all I had. I had no choice.
I was never wanting for food. I always had my own bedroom. I always had clothes. And I always knew she loved me. It's beyond impressive to me to think of what my mother did for me growing up and what she sacrificed, because I know she had a failed marriage and bad boyfriends, and I know she suffered from low self-esteem, and yet somehow, some way, she worked really hard. To make sure that I could live in those little pink apartments over there. Wow. See, these were all strawberry fields when I grew up. It's just mini mall after mini mall and chain store after chain store. And whenever I see a movie like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, and I think of these amazing, beautiful worlds, and then I look around here and I think, why don't we have that? This is why I don't live in Southern California. I was completely fascinated by extinct animals, dinosaurs, mammals, saber-toothed, mammoths, tyrannosaurs. It didn't matter. If it was big, if it was scary, I loved it. My grandparents and my mother would take me here to La Brea Tar Pits, and they would let me roam. And it was a place they would know I would go, and I would sit and I would draw. I would run around the museum and look at these ancient extinct animals. Whenever I come back here, it feels like home. When I started drawing my own series, Otherworld, I came back here and I took tons of reference photos. I then used the photos to create several scenes in the book. And I knew that right there in the sky above is where I wanted my villains to come crashing through a door and attack the heroes right over there on this hill. By the time I got to high school, I knew I was different. I knew I was gay. It certainly wasn't something I was ready to tell anyone. Here we go, gentlemen. Cypress High School, home of the Centurions. And as Obi-Wan Kenobi once said, you'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. You must be cautious. And because I could draw, I was friends with all the different cliques, and there were definitely cliques here. I drew unicorns for the girls and dragons for really cute boys, who it turns out were not so cute at my high school reunion. I think they peaked at about 17. Looking back on the coming out process, and mine was certainly stifled, one of the things I realized I did was turn all of my high school crushes into comic characters. I think it was a way to work through those crushes and create gifts for people and give signs of my affection without actually touching them, doing it in a really safe way. So by the end of high school, I had made over 50 or 60 comics for a teacher, a friend of mine, and 2 attorneys I'd worked with on a mock trial team. And I created these elaborate stories for them And then looking back on it, I realized that in all those comics, their wives were always getting kidnapped, and the kids were usually off stage, and their shirts were getting ripped off, and somehow I always managed to be in those comics. If I didn't know exactly what I was doing, they would have to be idiots not to. But I commend them because they put up with it and they tolerated it. They could have easily brushed me off, they could have rejected me and just told me to go away, but instead they encouraged me. They let me draw for them. In many ways, these three men gave me a really big gift and allowed me to be, and that's actually, I'm not sure any of them actually know that.